Thank you. All right, I'm going to call the Concord Township Board of Trustees July 17, 2019 meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Luda.
Here.
Mr. Malcheski.
Present.
Mr. Dondorfer.
Present.
Okay, approval of the July 3rd, 2019 regular trustees minutes. You okay with those?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, fiscal office.
I have no report, Mr.
No
Malcheski.
report?
No.
Mrs. Luda.
I have no report.
Mr. Dondorfer.
Just a few comments to make since our last meeting. As a new trustee and reflecting on what our responsibilities are, some of those important responsibilities are making critical decisions that impact the community and the future of Concord Township. With that in mind, I've spoken with several residents, either on the phone or personally, regarding our fire station project. Some of those people are here today. Others I've spoken to over the phone. Since my appointment in April, I had to get up to speed on the fire station project. We've worked diligently to come up with what I think is a very good footprint. I reviewed that recently with our fire chief, our deputy chief, and through my 26 years in public safety, I've had my occurrences to be in many fire stations and know operationally what needs to be there as far as serving the efficiency of the community. With that, we took a lot of community input from some people that are here today that had some good ideas, and we made some changes to that footprint. And upon reviewing that recently again with the chief and deputy chief and speaking with some other residents, I'm confident that we have a good footprint here that we're going to move forward on. And I know our goal is to build fire stations that sustain our safety services in Concord Township for the foreseeable future and to sustain the growth of the township. With that, I believe that we're going to responsibly fund that, and we're going to have some discussion on that today because, again, it's our obligation as trustees to be fiscally responsible in completing this project. So I've spoken with several residents, and there's going to be some situations where people have different ideas of how the fire station should look and appearance and things of that nature, and I respect those opinions. And there's going to be some differences, I think, in some of that. I've read some information about, that they appear to be, too big, uninspiring, but they're fire stations and they're designed to house our safety services, i.e. fire department, and they have to have operationally sound floor plans as far as the renditions. And I'm comfortable with my years of service. Again, as a law enforcement officer, I've worked in concert with the fire department over 26 years, and I'm very comfortable with what I saw on the recent renditions by the architect. And I appreciate everybody that has had input that we have worked together with, some of which are in this room and others that I've spoken with on the phone. There seems to be a lot of support from the community, from people that I've talked to, not only here but over the phone, and I look forward to getting this project done. So that's my brief report.
Well, thank you. Listen, I appreciate all the hard work that Carl and Connie have both done on looking at this issue and going over certain aspects of it. That being said, I do talk a lot. I am delighted to have for us tonight Hannah, who is a Concord Township resident. She is a student at Edinburgh College. She has been our intern this summer, has been diligently doing all kinds of different tasks, but one of the things that I did ask her to do was to give a report on our tax dollars in Concord Township. And so I would ask Hannah to come up here and introduce herself and explain to us a little bit about what we asked you to do.
Thank you, Mr. Malcheski. Hi, my name is Hannah Brentar. As previously stated, I am a student at Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, and I'm an intern with Concord Township for the summer. I started here at the beginning of June, and I must say I was very overwhelmed at first. Being a Riverside High School grad and living in Concord my entire life, I thought I had a basic understanding of how our government was running, and I was very wrong. I'm very grateful for this opportunity and experience, however. I've learned so much about the township I've lived in my entire life. I've had the pleasure of working on a number of interesting projects to help better the community, listening on government meetings, and I have met several city managers and township administrators all across Lake County. I've been asked by the chairman of the board, Mr. Malcheski, to do a presentation explaining how our taxes are spent in our township. I was very excited to start this project because most people do not know how their tax money is actually spent, including myself before this presentation. Since this is a new subject for me, I did research on the tax rates in our township and the breakdown of exactly where our money is spent, how much is spent where, and how to calculate these numbers so I could fully comprehend and explain how our taxes work. I apologize in advance if I sound repetitive or this is old information for you, but it's important for everyone to be aware of exactly how much of their money is being spent and where it is going.
First example is that your PowerPoints never work out right.
First of all, it is important to note the difference between the gross tax rate and the effective tax rate. The gross tax rate is originally agreed upon by the voters and indicates the highest amount the taxpayers will pay for each subdivision. The effective tax rate is the rate that residents will actually pay because of the decreasing millage rate over time and the increasing population of Concord. I will refer to the effective tax rate as the actual tax rate throughout this presentation. As most of you know, Concord Township is composed of 3 different school districts: Riverside, Mentor, and Chardon. Each school district has a different gross and actual tax rate. The gross tax rate for Riverside Local School District is 97.03, Mentor's is 111.78, and Chardon's is 112.36. The rate that you are actually paying in taxes is 65.21 for Riverside, 65.48 for Mentor, and 69.32 for Chardon. Now, exactly where do these numbers come from? Your taxes go to a number of different places, including Lake County, Concord Township, Riverside, Mentor, or Chardon local schools, libraries, joint vocational schools such as Auburn Career Center, and the Lake County Financing District, which is a school levy for Riverside that is shared between Eastern Lake County schools. I will begin by showing you the breakdown of each political subdivision and explaining what is included with each part. Lake County's gross tax rate is 16.78, which has several services including the Board of Alcohol, Drug Addiction and Mental Health Services, Board of Developmental Disabilities, the Narcotics Agency, Child Services, the Forensic Crime Laboratory, Senior Citizens, Lake Metro Parks, and Lakeland Community College. The actual effective tax rate for the county is 14.83, which means that roughly 23% of your taxes goes to the county and these agencies provided. Concord Township's tax rate is 11.7 and includes the general fund and roads and bridges, which is inside millage that the township is required to provide for the residents, as well as fire protection, roads, and safety forces such as sheriffs, which are voted in by the taxpayers. The actual effective tax rate is 10.75 after the decreasing millage rate, so about 16.5% of your taxes goes towards Concord Township. Schools are generally where the majority of your tax money goes to. Living in the Riverside Local School District, the gross tax rate is 60.45, which is now actually 34.24. Mentor's is 81.30, which has been lowered to 38.15. And Chardon's gross tax rate is 80.68, which turns out to be 40.63. So more than half of your tax dollars help support the school systems. Then we have other places such as libraries, which tax rates range from 1.7 to 2, depending on the school district, and have been lowered to as low as 1.61. Joint vocational schools such as Auburn Career Center's tax rate is 1.5 for Riverside and Chardon schools. And we have the Lake County Financing District, whose tax rate is 4.9 for the Eastern Lake County districts, which has decreased to 2.28. So to summarize all of that, here's how your taxes are broken up to get your total gross tax rate per school district in Concord Township. The tax rate you're actually paying for each school district is 65.21 for the Riverside District, 65.48 for Mentor Schools, and 69.32 for the Chardon District. Notice how these rates significantly decrease over time, which helps lower taxes in several ways. Now let's talk about roughly how much of your money is going where. It's important to note the millage rate, which is the rate to calculate local property taxes. For Concord Township, the millage rate is $35 per $100,000 value of your house. So to find the amount of money spent per each subdivision, you multiply the millage rate of 35 times the value of your house per 100,000. Now I know, at least for me, I do better with examples, so we will do one here. Since the majority of Concord citizens live in the Riverside School District and the average house value in Concord is around $300,000, we will use this as our example. So we will take our actual tax rate, which is about 65 for the township, times that by our millage rate of 35, and times that by our appraised value of our house per 100,000. In this case, it is 3. After multiplying these together, you get $6,847.05. Now I know, this number seems to be a lot of money spent in your taxes every year. However, keep in mind that Concord is a growing community and continues to increase in population as new developments are being built and more businesses are moving into Concord. In fact, our total population has increased 3.35% since 2010. Trust me, living in Concord my entire life, I have been able to experience firsthand the increase in population, and I can understand how some residents want to preserve our rural feel of the township. However, I truly believe that this increase in Concord's residents is a positive thing, as it will lower our taxes and millage rates in Concord, as Concord continues to grow without completely urbanizing the township. As our population increases, our tax rates continue to go down since there are more people paying for taxes, which lowers the millage rate. So this number is at most the amount of tax dollars you're paying living in a $300,000 house in the Riverside School District, and it continues to decrease as more people move into Concord Township. Now let's look at the breakdown of these taxes to see exactly how much of your money goes where. Using the same process as earlier, we will use the effective tax rate of each subdivision multiplied by the millage rate and the appraised value of your house and property per $100,000. Going back to the tax rates discussed earlier, the township's effective tax rate is 10.75. Multiplying that by 35 and 3 provides you with $1,128.75, which is approximately the amount of your tax dollars that are spent towards the township in this scenario. Following that same process, I did similar calculations for the county, schools, libraries, Lake City schools, and joint vocational schools to get approximately what amount will be spent towards each subdivision for a $300,000 house in the Riverside Local School District. As you can see, the township only gets a small portion of your taxes, as the majority of your tax money goes to these other places. Again, keep in mind that this is the most amount of money that a person at this rate is going to pay because of the decreasing millage rate and the increasing residents of Concord. Our taxes are such a huge part of our lives, and it is an important topic for the public to understand them. One thing I've learned while working with local government is if people want to know more information about anything that goes on in their township, they absolutely have that right and can get involved in whichever way and however much by making an effort to do so. The same goes for taxes. You absolutely have the right to know exactly where your money goes, since it is in fact your money. I believe this project allowed me to show the public where and how much of your tax money is being spent, including learning it for myself. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you have a better understanding of how your taxes work.
Thank you, Hannah. That was awesome. Greatly appreciate it. Mr. Rose, you get the next report.
Thank you, Mr. Malcheski. Good evening, members of the board, Mrs. Dawson, members of the public. On today's agenda is Resolution 2019 TAC 18. This is a resolution to enter into an agreement with Burgess & Nyepel for architectural services. We plan to utilize Burgess & Nyepel to evaluate the current Town Hall Administration building. This study will evaluate the existing township administration functions in the existing facility, define any requirements for a possible addition, and also put a priority concern of the spaces being evaluated as ADA compliant. Resolution 2019 TAC 19. This is the bond levy. This resolution places the question on the November 5th, 2019 ballot that will be decided by the voters. It is a $10 million bond, it's 28 years, and right now the millage is set for the ballot at .83. The Fire Station 1 renderings are complete. They are posted on our website. They are also on Facebook. Rick, could you put those on the screen quickly? We have the site plan. I know that's difficult to see in this room. This is more for the folks at home on TV. We have full-size renderings here. If you could go to the next one, that's the site plan, and then that is the floor plan of the Fire Station 1. We did not make any changes to Fire Station 2. Thank you, Rick. The plans are currently with the engineers for cost estimation. We anticipate those back by the end of next week at the latest. That's what we're being told. My best guess is they will come back around $9 million for Station 1. We do, as I stated earlier, we do have a full set of renderings here for both stations. We've made them available prior to the meeting. We'll make them available for review immediately following the meeting. And our fire chief and deputy fire chief are also available for questions after the meeting, and they're currently sitting in the audience. We continue to meet with residents to discuss our fire station project. We welcome the opportunity to meet with anyone who has questions, comments, or concerns. And I again encourage anyone who wants to know more about the project to contact myself, contact the trustees, or contact the fire chief or deputy fire chief to discuss the project. On to a lighter note, as a reminder to everyone, we have a Concord Bicentennial that's coming up in a few years. Early planning has started with that, and we have the Concord's Bicentennial Logo Contest that is currently underway. The entries for that logo contest are due by mid-December. We are also seeking historical photos of Concord Township, so as you're cleaning out your storage spaces, please be mindful of those pictures of people, places, or things that are tied to or related to Concord Township and its history. Additional information regarding our bicentennial events and information is available on our website at concordtwp.com under the Recreation tab. That concludes my report, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. This leads us to the audience portion. There's never a great way to go ahead and handle the audience portion, so we're gonna start easiest on the right-hand side, and please come up, announce your name and address, and let us give us some information. We do have a fairly big crowd here today, so let's try to limit it to 4 minutes. Come on up.
Good evening. I'm Brian Massey, 8196 Rainbow Drive. I have some basic questions. The .83 mils, 28-year bond, that's for both fire stations, is it not, Mr. Rose? That
Yes, sir.
covers both? Have we looked into the possibility of just building one fire station over 5 years, and then at the end of the 5 years, and that's paid for, build the second? No one's going to argue, really, and looking at the actual structures of the fire station, it certainly appears that it needs to be updated. So that's sort of a given.
Yeah, let me clear. Yes, yes, we've looked at that. The Fire Station 2 will be completely paid for by JED dollars.
Correct.
Okay. We'll use some TIF money, we'll use some stormwater money, but that's somewhat nominal compared to the JED dollars. Fire Station 1, and again, we're going to have someone talk to us a little bit more about that, but the bond has to cover the construction, and I'll have bond counsel explain that. The number could be lowered because obviously we can get a good bid. The the millage could be lowered because we have a lower interest rate. Prior to ever being collected, we will be able to refinance that in 7 years. It would be my intent that the township has always been in projection to refinance that and have that paid off. So this is the package that we found to be the most reasonable, that allows us to borrow some money with the anticipation of lowering that and having that off the taxpayers, off that additional tax off the taxpayers' back sooner than later.
It's still for 28 years. So the bond itself, we've said that that is for both fire stations. The JED funds are going to be used for the operational costs? I must have missed that.
No, I apologize, and I gave a kind of a more detailed breakdown at our last meeting, and maybe I should have recapped that for this meeting. The 10 million, the question that's going, if the trustees approve Resolution 19, the .83 mil bond levy goes on the ballot. That $10 million will fund Station 1. Once Station 1 is complete, Station 2, we will then go out and we will either get a loan, secure another bond through another issuance, and we will back that with JED dollars to pay for Station 2. But we will not come back to the voters for an additional levy for Station 2. This is the only issue that will come up for the voters for both stations, but this is predominantly for Station 1.
So Station 1 is $9 million, and what is the cost for Station number 2 then? Was that a $4 million?
We think that's going to come in at about 4.5, between 4.5 and 5 is where we are right now.
And Mr. Rose, how does that compare to other fire stations in other communities? Is that in the ballpark of what other communities have paid for the fire
Station 2 is in the ballpark. Station 1, our station that we have planned is higher, but you also have to factor in construction costs and other variables. Some of those stations were built several years ago. You also have to factor in that these are engineer estimates, and more than likely, while there's no guarantee, it is likely that once they actually do go out for bid, they historically have come in under the engineer's estimate, which will also then shave some money. The other factor that's not built into this, while it doesn't affect the actual cost of the fire station, is the fact that we are applying to be included in the state's capital budget. That will happen later this year. We were originally told we had to have something in by the end of July. In speaking with Mr. Reed, I believe Bob Reed is his name. His name is Bob, but I believe his last name is Reed. He is our state representative's legislative assistant, and he's now telling us probably mid-August those packages will be due to be reviewed, but they likely won't vote on that until later in the year based on the legislative calendar. While that doesn't affect the overall cost of the station, it does affect if we do get some funding for that from the state, that will reduce the amount that we go out for a bond issuance.
Just a couple more questions, if I may, Mr. Malcheski. Of the $9 million for this Fire Station 1, is there, are there reasons, specific reasons why it got to $9 million? Are there some state mandates, fire station mandates that says you must have this, which adds the cost to the fire station?
I will defer that question to the fire chief. He can probably answer that after the meeting. I will tell you that our fire station does meet NFPA regulations, and especially we paid particular attention to the areas of contamination or decontamination, so that when the firefighters come back from a scene, they have the ability to decontaminate before going into other parts of the fire station.
I see.
We don't want another
So
wanna
that's added some additional
cut down
costs.
on the considerations,
Okay.
decontamination.
I see you've taken away the continuous levies, and so I appreciate that. There's no continuous levies
No, sir.
associated with that. And for the young ladies' presentation, I thought it was very well done. I agree that $35 per 100,000 of market value is a correct calculation. Many people don't understand that. However, the idea that our taxes are going to keep going down, what my studies have shown that as we grow as a community, although HB 920 does, lower that effective tax rate, the more people, you're going to add more services. So there's going to be demands for more police, more fire, more roads. So unfortunately, the taxes never go down. They will continue to go up. And I agree that about 17% is going to the Concord, and 68 to 70% is going to our schools. And I'm trying to make everyone aware there's going to have to be a paradigm shift on how we are educating our kids, because it is not sustainable with what we're doing. And the township is, I know you got a tough job as we're growing, but I am very concerned for the seniors of the community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Come on up, sir. And I see you in the back, sir, so we'll get you next, okay?
Paul Dunn, 7074 Brightwood Drive. I just have one comment regarding Station 2. You indicated that's going to be paid with the JED dollars. If those JED dollars were not to be used for the fire station, where would they be spent, or what would those dollars be used for?
Well, they recently were used for the road project on Cryle and Auburn Road. It was our intent initially in the drafting of that agreement that we would use them, as necessary for safety forces. And it was our intent to use them on Station 1 and 2 initially. It is now our intent that, because we've come up with this package, to use the bond levy to pay for Station 1. The JED dollars will be used for the engineering cost of that station, paying down Station 1, and then when we're ready to build Station 2, we'll use all those JED dollars for Station 2.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, sir. I don't want to forget about you back there as I saw you.
My name is Robert Sanderson. I live at 7796 Rock Dove Lane. I would like to read from a letter that I sent to all of you.
Sure.
And thank you, Mr. Malcheski, for responding. Ladies and gentlemen, since you have introduced the idea of 2 new fire stations in our community, I have not heard anyone speak alienating against those proposals. I have heard people speak against the way you intend to finance them, which is basically putting the debt burden on the property owners of Concord Township. I would like to ask you to please reconsider your current thinking and plan the construction of these 2 fire stations within the Concord Township sources of income. Property taxes in Concord Township have become a burden, especially for seniors, as you have heard testified to you from current senior residents. We agree on the need to improve the fire stations. You have the ability to implement this improvement and not put it on the backs of residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, how about anybody in row 2 in the rear?
Hi, I'm Jack Binley, and I live at 6975 Auburn Ridge Drive in Concord. I'm here to say that I know there's a need to upgrade our fire departments, and I agree with them. I don't agree with the footprints, and I don't agree with a few other things that are in the project. By looking on the Facebook tonight about 5 o'clock, it looked like your minds were already made up. And I question the leadership in that because the community has some concerns about the price, and you want us to pass a 9 or 10 mil levy when the building, we were just told, was going to come in at somewhere around 9. If I do my math right, we got an extra million there that you're asking us to pay for over 28 years. I also think I heard, tell me if I'm wrong, that it was your hope to pay this off in 7 years.
Well, you can refinance it in 7 years for sure. Whether or not we pay it off in 7 years.
You're asking the voters of Concord to support a levy. You don't know the interest rate. You don't know the bond rate. You don't know the real cost. I just have some deep concerns that way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, anybody in that row that Mr. Miley was just in, or anyone in Mr. Dunn's row? Anybody in the front row? Vanessa, you want to say anything? All right, well, you go now. Okay. Anybody else? Oh, come on up here, Mr. Falcone.
I'm Mark Falcone, reside at 10185 Page Drive. Couple questions I have. First is going back to the June 19th meeting. You voted to have legal research a resolution to terminate a continuous levy after the purpose no longer exists. Is there any resolution to that?
I don't have an answer to that, but I guess in a sense with respect to the that was whether or not we were going to finance this property with or this building with a continuous levy.
Yes.
And because we have forgone that decision and decided to do a bond levy. I still haven't heard back from legal counsel
Okay,
on
yes.
that, but it
I know we have
became
two
irrelevant at least to
continuous
that.
levies still going.
Otherwise, with regards to regular continuous levies, the trustees can go ahead and put an issue up
Yeah.
and
We
take
could
that
get
away.
some resolution and have the residents of Concord informed on that vote and the
Right,
resolution.
without doing any other research than that. With the research we were talking about was requiring or burdening upon a new board to automatically withdraw that continuous levy that if it was going to be using to fund a building and it was no longer necessary.
Sure.
So,
Sure, I understand the focus was
Yeah.
because the continuous levy was being thought for this project. Okay, I do want to oppose the high cost of this firehouse. The 2 fire stations, I think that's way exceeds the semi-rural character of Concord Township. And I would like some reassurances from the trustees. I know they're not going to be around here for 28 years, probably going on to bigger and better things. That they're going to use JED funds, TIF funds to pay off this bond as best they can, as best they see fit. That's my biggest concern, that things are going to keep on escalating. And of course, station number 2 is going to be built after station 1. Do we have any reassurances from the trustees that you're not going to be coming to the voters to ask for another bond issue, for another levy? Would the JED funds and the TIF funds take care of this? I want some reassurances from the trustees that diligently you guys are paying it through those funds, the JED and the TIF.
I don't disagree with you on that. I think at one point we'll do a resolution on the total financing package so that is voted on by this board. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, very
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Funk. All right, anybody else on the right-hand side? Or anybody else on the left-hand side? Come on up.
I'm John Pesic, 11705 Cali Court. I have some comments, but first I had a question. We have a $10 million bond issuance. What are the restrictions on where we can spend that money?
That's outlined in the resolution that it can only be utilized for fire station construction, sir.
So if it's not spent on Fire Station 1, it rolls over into Fire Station number 2?
It can, but that's not the intent. The intent is to do a bond issuance for what the cost of Fire Station 1 comes back at on the actual bid.
So right now, you are resolving for a $10 million bond package, but you're going to wait until the bid comes in and reduce that bond? And then what happens with construction overages or underages?
Construction overages and underages are factored into the bid that is built in. Contractors and the engineers build in and that's negotiated either a 10 or 15% contingency.
So now, what I heard today, though, was that the trustees are fully expecting that the construction costs will be less than $9 million. But $9 million is 40% more than the average fire station that's been going up in the area. And that's not due to inflation over the past 2 to 3 years. If I'm right, construction costs aren't going up nearly that much. I don't know why we need such an expensive fire station. When I look at the 0.8 mils required to finance this, that is, 0.8 is about 8% of Concord's budget. In other words, we are going to have our Concord taxes increase by 8% in order to fund this, and that goes on for 28 years. Now, we may hear things that some future trustee will feel very obliged to pay down debts. I've never known a politician really to do that because they have money that they want to spend in the short term. I know Concord's had a different history than that, but we have to look to the future. We're going to have new trustees, at least one, maybe 2 members of this board won't be here again. But furthermore, refinancing in 7 years, we don't know what interest rates will be like in 7 years. We don't know that we can refinance this at a lower rate. We very well could have much higher interest rates in 7 years. I'd also like to take issue, the intern mentioned that more people bring in more revenue, so our taxes are likely to go down. That directly conflicts with what former trustee Chris Galloway said when he commented in a meeting here that the budgets of townships are really like a Ponzi scheme. That is, the new home construction and the new people coming in pay for the costs to maintain the roads of the older developments. And we know we're going to be caught up when this Ponzi scheme comes due during the lifetime of this loan. So we need to consider that. We need to consider how expensive this station is, even though it may seem like we're rolling in money right now. We're not going to be rolling in money in 5 to 10 years. If we had saved the money that was spent on Capitol Parkway and some other expenditures that have gone on in the last couple of years, we could have saved money so we could pay for this fire station out of our current revenues rather than coming and asking for a long-term debt. And I think fiscal responsibility is really important. You said in the future we're going to have another fire station. We're right now talking about an admin building. All of these expenditures pile up. And again, our township finances are due to get worse rather than better. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody in Mr. Pesic's role? Anybody in the next? Come on up, sir. I apologize, I don't know everybody's name, so I feel bad saying come on up.
No, that's fine. I'm kind of new at this anyway. Paul Castro, 11323 South Forest Drive. The last meeting that we had, it was discussed in somewhat of detail, some of the specifics that went to building up the cost. And one that was kind of alarming to me as I was sitting here was the number that was attributed towards the architectural fee and the maintenance engineering fee by the architects over the period of construction. I don't remember the exact dollars, but it was over $1 million.
It's true.
And it was a significant percentage of the total cost of the project. And I went under the assumption that there was going to be some discussion and possibly some negotiation with the firm to see if that number could be brought down. Am I off base? What has happened on that issue, and where are we today? Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rose, you want to address that?
Sure.
Yeah.
We have disputed the Phase 2 proposal from the architect and / engineering firm. The engineering firm is AECom. That's no secret. They are a subcontractor. They do all the engineering for mechanical and structural for the architect. We have disputed those charges. As a matter of fact, we had a phone conference with the architect last week. There was a resident that was in there when we were discussing this. We don't have a final number yet because we've disputed it. We think it's too much. I have an email that they have yet to answer, and we're waiting for that answer from the architectural firm on why some of these things are listed in there and why these costs are so high. So we are continuing to try to drive down the administrative costs of the construction. They typically fall in the 10 to 12% range, and these are in about the 15 to 17, 18% range, and we feel that those are high. So we are negotiating and trying to drive those costs down. They have not answered us yet.
Well, then, sir.
Okay, come on up, yeah.
Please.
So we could, you know, as of right now, we're revamping our system here, but as of right now, nobody could hear you unless you're at that microphone for the TV, and so I think it's important.
Thank you. So, Mr. Rose, then, are we jumping the gun by going after a dollar amount today that could be significantly lower by hundreds of thousands of dollars?
No, sir, because what will, and this is Andy Rose, the administrator's opinion, I am not speaking for the board on this. I've advised this in the past. Fire station comes in at $7.5 million once the general contractor bids it. 10 to 12% for engineering, inspection, construction drawings, etc. That bond that we go out for the actual issuance would be 8-point-something million. At that point, the millage to the voters or to the citizens gets reduced by whatever that is.
Okay, then, Mr. Rose, when would you be able to report, or when would the board be able to report the success or failure of being able to renegotiate those fees?
We won't, two things, we won't sign a final contract with the engineers until we're satisfied with the price. And that probably won't happen until we know whether or not the levy passes.
It just seems odd that it seems like the cart's before the horse, but like I said, I'm new to this.
We can't turn on detailed construction drawings. That's about $400,000 or $500,000. I can't commit to that and sign a contract for that until I know that the voters have approved if they approve the fire station project.
Well, the more.
This is no
and-
different than a school construction any other municipal, any construction project. That's typically how this works.
Well, in terms of presenting to the voting citizens of the community, that ambiguity is not necessarily going to be good press and convincing to get this thing over the top. I do believe that there needs to be some assistance for the firefighters, and I would also recommend that you go beyond just discussing decontamination in terms of letting the citizens know what you're bringing in terms of improvements. Decontamination is something most of us know about. All you have to do is just turn on the TV and find out what's happening to the firefighters that were the first responders over at 9/11. It's extremely important. But I'm sure there are other things going into that fire department that need to be enumerated, and the information needs to be transferred to the people that are going to vote yes or no. But I am concerned about the ambiguity and the cost. Thank you for listening.
Yes, sir.
Okay, anybody in Mr. Castro's row additionally? How about the row behind him?
Good evening, Denise Brewster, 7207 Alexander Road. Just following up on some of the discussion that took place. First of all, I wanted to say nice job, Hannah. That was a lot of work. I can appreciate that. I did talk to Amy earlier about the $1.8 million that we do get from inside millage, because I wanted to know if with the increase in property taxes that affects inside millage, does that mean an increase for Concord? Right now, it doesn't appear so. It's been pretty consistent at about 1.8 million, which goes into roads and general fund. And so I was just wondering that, because I know with schools, inside millage is probably bigger and probably will affect their funding. They have more of an impact. And following up on the tax comment, taxes go down primarily when we get commercial and some industrial offset. And that's why it's so important that we just don't constantly build out Concord with residential, because residential does not pay for itself. It ends up costing us money, and that's why it's important to continue to attract businesses, and I think a lot of people feel that way, and we have areas designated for that. We know that we need new fire stations. Please don't ever think that we don't appreciate our firefighters and what they do on a daily basis. I heard them at least 3 times today. I know they're busy and they need their stations, and what they're living in is not good. However, I also feel that, you know, when you have to work with the community and you have to find a way that the residents are willing to spend a certain dollar amount, obviously it's additional tax, you have to find a happy medium. I'm going to go back to what I said at a prior meeting about the JED funds. The creation of the JED, which is money that we created, it was a funding mechanism to address infrastructure and safety issues without increasing property taxes across the township. The intent was not to have Concord residents spend $10 million for one fire station and $5 million in interest over 28 years for a total of $15 million. That's a lot of money. I know, I did the math. I would be 95. You could do the math and figure out how old I am. But anyway, the point being that, I mean, it's a lot. It's a long time. I mean, when we complained about a continuous levy, we didn't like it because we knew that there would be an end to paying for the fire station. And so we didn't want to be saddled with a tax. But now, 28 years is like being saddled with the tax forever. I wanted to ask, since we didn't get an answer, there was no answer, or was it ever researched about the continuous levy being stopped? And then also what Mr. Hack brought up about the 10-year loan that was brought up. So I don't know if you want to address that now or later.
I don't have an answer on stopping a continuous levy to pay for a fire station by strapping another board at a later time to be able to do that. I don't have an answer on that. With regards to the 10-year, Mr. Hack, there's a couple issues. There's a disagreement between, I believe, Mr. Lucas and I about how you regulate what millage does that require. Is it inside millage or is it just all our outside millage that would allow us to qualify for to use that? The problem we have on a 10-year levy is the millage would be too high, something more like a 2.5 mils, which I do believe is just not something that I would be willing to go ahead and ask a voter to vote on at a time like this. I just think, a 2.5 millage is way too high. So that's my personal opinion on that. And like I said, the law, Mr. Lucas and I may disagree on.
Okay, well, I just thought it was an important point to be researched, because 28 years is a long time, and I don't know what other options, but I do feel that for one station, if the final price tag to the taxpayers is 15 million, it may be a little less because we might refinance or pay off early, but it is excessive. And, in the Tri-County area, there's only one station that costs that, and that's Beechwood, and we're not Beechwood. So, but, I just want to respectfully disagree. I respect all of you. I've had good conversations with all of you. You have been extremely open to ideas that I have shared with you, especially on the design. And, but I have a serious concern when I look at the taxes. And that is, something that I don't know whether it would be, as far as looking at the JED, whether if the intent was not to have citizens or residents spend that much money, whether it should have been a 2/3, 1/3 split. Why is it, I think really we're going back to the very beginning when we looked at the funding that was proposed. There was the possibility of a 1 mil levy. We're at 0.83, but of what it was going to raise. But with the fact that you're going to use JED dollars for a certain period of time, even if you say 10 years, there's still going to be another 18 years that we're paying that you're going to have JED dollars, and that's a lot of money that could have paid this.
But if it's paid off early, and so, like anything, I don't know how people run their finances, but there's a lot of people that go ahead and get a 30-year mortgage and make extra payments and pay it off in 15 years. There's other people that force themselves to do that by 15 years. All I can tell you is the track record of Concord Township has historically paid off, if we've ever borrowed, and we rarely do, pay things off very early. And one of the first times we did is when we bought some trucks. It was the first time we were going to buy these plow trucks, and we were going to take a loan out on it because we were able to get a 0% interest rate, and we were able to kind of use the fleet, and we paid those off extremely early. So we're very conscientious about not spending dollars, but we are also conscientious of probably trying to give us a little bit of breathing room as we see things come in. And I think as time comes on, it will, it will be paid off early. I think the number's going to be lower. I will have somebody talk about that and how it works. I do think that the question becomes, is the chicken or the egg that comes first? When I say that, I mean, we may ask the voters to approve a bond levy not to exceed $10 million, not to have an interest rate higher than 4.3, and not to have a millage rate greater than 0.83. And then it's incumbent upon administration and the trustees and staff to reduce that. Nothing goes on, nothing goes to the auditor and treasurer and the collection of those dollars and funds until that number is set at a number. And by law, I think it has to be set at what the cost of that construction is on Station 1, and what that interest rate is on that bond. And then you have a number, and then that is what gets turned on to the voters. And so it is tough, but you have to have some guarantees that there is the ability to go ahead and pay for that. That's the only way the bank will fund those things. And I will have I'll have bond counsel go ahead and speak on that.
Well, I mean, as I said, it's a lot of money, and there's a lot of variables in this that are not making some people feel secure in moving ahead. But I really feel that I would like an answer to that 10-year funding option, whatever that was. That
Yeah, I again, my belief is it's not possible. It's not a possibility
because of the high millage.
Because of the millage arranged. But additionally, and there's going to be a question of what millage counts. But from my standpoint, the millage that it would cost to go ahead and bond that and pay for that was way too high.
Yeah.
And so I was not prepared. I wanted something under 1 mils. I thought that would be a reasonable request, and we'll continue to get that lower. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for your work. I do appreciate the comments that you've made. All right, is there anybody else? Okay, I'm going to move on to our new business, Resolution 2019-17, Alice Fish, Concord Community Day Citizens of the Year. Didn't we used to do this secretly?
No.
We
Never.
always read this first?
Yes. Okay.
I thought it was a surprise at one time.
Let me read Resolution 2019-17. Concord Community Day 2019 Citizen of the Year, Alice Fish. Whereas Mary Alice Fish, friend, neighbor, and good citizen of Concord Township for 15 years, has, through her dedication to home, family, community, and profession, consistently set the finest example for the values of good citizenship. And whereas Alice, originally from Cleveland, is married to husband Warren and has a sister, Peg, residing in Sarasota, Florida. Alice has 2 daughters, Dina and Julie, and 4 beautiful granddaughters, Mary Faith, Veronica Kay, Jane Lee, and Karis May. And whereas Alice worked for J.C. Penney and was a media center specialist and main office secretary at Shore Junior High School in Mentor, Ohio. Alice moved to Kentucky in 1987 due to Warren's job transfer and served as administrative assistant to the Chief Information Officer of the University of Kentucky Medical Center. Alice moved to Concord Township in 2004 to establish a permanent homestead. And whereas Alice is a dedicated and active member of the Concord Garden Club for over 14 years, serving as first vice president in 2014 and 2015, president in 2016 and 2017, advisor in 2018, and now serves at the Long Range Planning and Giving Chair in 2019. And whereas Alice volunteers as a member of the Concord Township Bicentennial Planning Committee and at St. James Church in Painesville. Alice is a valued and active contributor to the betterment of Concord Township through her countless volunteer hours and committed service to our community. Now therefore be it resolved that we, the Concord Township Board of Trustees, Lake County, State of Ohio, on behalf of the residents of Concord Township, do hereby with great privilege recognize and pay honor and tribute to Alice Fish as the Concord Township Citizen of the Year for 2019. I move that we adopt this resolution.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and we'll all sign it. There's 2 copies.
Dan, do you have a copy of Resolution 2019-8?
18 or 19?
18.
Okay, here we go. You sign these. 2 copies.
Okay, as you guys are signing that, there's a Resolution 2019-18, a resolution authorizing the Board of Trustees for Concord Township to enter into an agreement with Burgess and Nyepel for architectural services. This contract does not allow them to cease, or does not allow them to go over activity that would cost anything greater than $18,800. This is it's my intent that these services are used, and certainly spoken to our administrator. We certainly have, the first problem is we have some significant water problems here. Our elevator chute has water in it constantly that's being bailed out. There's some significant drainage issues around the perimeter. It was my intent initially to engage Burgess and Nyepel to take a look at those types of issues. You know, we have a rain garden in the rear of this, and as we went in there, we're going to look at some other structural things with regards to stormwater, the ability to keep water away from the property, and then what else, what potential do we have on any additions to this building. There are no additions planned for this building. But it would be nice to have some information about what at least we would need to do to get the water away from here, and then the additional review for the structure of the building. So with that, I would ask that we entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt Resolution 2019-18.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Now we come to Resolution 2019-19. Can I see that document? We have been talking with, and I mentioned earlier, we started talking to bond counsel sometime after the Thanksgiving holiday, but before Christmas. We have in the audience here is Mr. Callender. Mr. Callender is a Concord resident, but is a lawyer, does a lot of bond work, and we'd ask that if he come up here, introduce himself. And my understanding is that you had a hand in this drafting of this document. So if you would, please educate us.
Sure. Thank you, Board of Trustees and officers. As Mr. Malczewski stated, I started talking with the township shortly after Thanksgiving, talking about various options that the township could pursue. Got a call from Mr. Rose probably, a few weeks ago that this is the direction you wanted to at least investigate further. So at your previous meeting in July 3rd, you adopted the first resolution that was necessary to put it on the ballot. That resolution really, the main purpose of it is for you to have asked the county auditor to certify back to you various information that's required by the statute, by the Ohio Revised Code. And that's where the .83 mils comes from. And so there's really three variables that you all have talked about quite a bit in the audience today as well that create that millage rate. The variables are the principal amount of the bonds, the number of years in which you intend to go out, and an estimated interest rate. So the tricky one there obviously is the estimated interest rate. That is estimated. You did have a professional financial advisor provide you with that number, and that's what was used in the resolution. I've been in public finance for about 20 years, practice all over the country in this, not just the state. I would not go forward unless you had a financial advisor tell you what that interest rate would be. And they came up with that, I believe it was 4.15. So you certified that information to the county auditor came back and said that would equate to approximately 0.83 mils. Again, that's an estimate. So the next step in the process then, after you have received that, is obviously the resolution that you have in front of you. That resolution takes the information that you receive from the county auditor, puts it into a form along with a suggested ballot, the actual question that would go on the ballot. What you have in front of you has that information that you would then use to, if you saw fit, if you pass this resolution tonight, that would go to the Board of Elections along with the previous resolution which you adopted and the county auditor certificate, and that's what you would file with the Board of Elections prior to August 7th in order to get it on the November 5th ballot. So that's kind of the boring part of the procedure of how you get to this point. It's boring but very important that obviously you follow the revised code step by step, which you have thus far. Once it goes to the voters, if the voters approve it, and if you approve it tonight, then once that election is certified, then you're at that point, you have authorization to issue up to $10 million worth of bonds for a maximum period of 28 years. It can be something less than $10 million, and it can be for a shorter period. It does not have to be at 28 years. And obviously, we won't know the interest rate, which this is just about every bond deal that I've worked on in 20 years. You won't know the interest rate until you actually go to the market. This particular issue is of a size that, again, as I stated previously, you've engaged financial advisors. They have suggested to you, which I completely agree, that going out to the public market is going to provide the most efficient sale of the bond for the township. What that means is we'll actually have a prospectus of the township, an official statement that we'll prepare. It's a lengthy document, 50, 60 pages, has all sorts of statistics and demographics. That will go out to potential investors, and you will have likely hired a capital markets firm to underwrite those bonds. And it won't be until that date that you actually sell them where you know the precise interest rate. At that point, there's normally a 2-week period after that in which we actually close the bonds, the proceeds come in. Some of the questions that I've heard here today is what the proceeds can be used for. We're very specific in the resolution I've provided you, and I will be very specific in all of the closing documentation should the township actually go forward with issuing the bonds, that those can only be used for capital needs and only for, specifically, I think the description was a fire station, constructing, furnishing, and equipping a fire station building and improving the site thereof. So we are very much restricted to that language for what you can use the proceeds for. Most bonds, and Mr. Malcheski, you've mentioned numerous times about 7 years. There is a normal lockout period that you cannot prepay, especially if you go out to the public market. That's part of getting the efficiency and getting the better interest rate. 7 years is, 10 years is actually the most common. 7 years is becoming a little bit more common for reasons that happy to explain, but probably you don't want to necessarily get into right now. But tax law changes created a situation in which that lockout period is decreasing over time. So 7 years is probably a pretty good time period to say that that's your lockout period and that's your ability to prepay. The one thing, just to clarify, if you do prepay, under Ohio law, you can do that as long as you're not using these funds necessarily to do that. In other words, you can't raise the millage way high in order to prepay. You're kind of stuck within your construct in order to do that. So if you had those extra JED funds coming in, you can use those to certainly to prepay. With that, I know that was a lot of a lot of information thrown at you at once, but happy to answer any other questions or delve into.
First question is that, you know, you heard there was some discussion that I mean, we all think that the $10 million amount is high. Why do we have a $10 million amount when we know that we're going to get, when we believe we're going to get a lot lower than that construction cost?
Sure. So it's not uncommon to put a not-to-exceed amount on the ballot, which is exactly what you're doing. You're saying to the voters, you're making a deal with them, you absolutely are not going to go beyond $10 million. There is absolutely nothing that prevents you, and it is not uncommon to actually go out at something less than $10 million. And so that's within your, and you will decide that once, you know, if the voters, if you approve tonight, the voters approve, when you actually, what will be in front of the Board of Trustees at that point is a bond resolution, which I guarantee you will be a lot longer than this one. It'll be about 20, 25 pages, have all sorts of information in it. That's where you're going to set a number of what you're actually going out for, which will not exceed, cannot exceed $10 million. So that's not uncommon.
So if we get a bid and it's $8 million, we have an interest rate that's lower than the 4.15 that we could lock in at. So now we have an $8 million, we got a 3% interest rate. We haven't taken any money from the taxpayer yet on that matter. What do we do with those two things to lower that millage rate to the taxpayer?
Sure. So, you know, first of all, obviously, if we go back to the very beginning of my discussion, the millage rate is a product of three different variables: the principal amount, the number of years, and the interest rate. So you're describing two of those are going down. You could also reduce the number of years. You can't do it by a tremendous amount, but you could reduce the number of years on the initial issue.
Sure.
All three of those things are going to drive the millage rate down, because all three of those things are going to drive your annual debt service cost down. And that's where the millage rate is coming, is there's a calculation that's being made as to principal amount, number of years, interest rate, what does that equal per year if you had level debt service throughout the entire 28 years or whatever the years are, number of years are. So as those variables come down, so does your millage.
So, but as those come down, I mean, obviously you inform the general public that, you know, what you originally approved was a 0.83 mil. You know, we've been able to work those numbers down, and so now it's let's just say January 30th, and we still haven't signed a contract yet, but we know those numbers are going to go down. We announce it to the general public. We sign contracts. We send paperwork. My assumption is to the auditor's office to give us a lower millage rate.
That's it. What you're going to do every year is to provide to the county auditor what your debt service is going to be every year. That's where they then calculate the necessary millage in order to create that debt service payment. And so that's exactly what happens, Paul, is that the debt service that you're using or you're estimating is what is going to create or trigger in the county auditor's office that millage rate. So if it's lower than whatever they've estimated it at the 0.83, then that millage rate will lower. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
And that's actually something we do every year anyway. So we provide the county auditor debt service every year. Even though we haven't taken out bonds, we have taken out truck loans, and we've got the SIB loan with the state, so I'm required by law to do that.
That's right.
Mr. Rose, do you have any questions?
No, sir, thank you.
Mr. Dondorfer?
Yeah, one question, Mr. Calendar, since I'm the new guy on the block here, so I can understand, and I know some of the general public here had some questions. When you talk about the not to exceed 10 million, that is written like that because when the cost estimates come in and the bids come in and we, as trustees, look to cut those costs, we're looking at, we're not going over that, but we're working and driving down the costs, and that's the standard process across the board when local government entities such as townships apply for a bond, correct?
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, there's a wide variety of circumstances when a local political subdivision goes to the ballot and asks for a bond. They're in all sorts of different stages of development at that point. For a township or a municipality, this is pretty common.
Okay.
School districts, because oftentimes it's a part of the state CFAP program, and they're set where they are, and they're told how much everything is going to be. They tend to have a little bit more of a firm number when they go to the ballot. But for townships and municipalities, absolutely.
And then after, you said 7 years, the township has the ability to...
So that's a great question. That will all be determined by when you actually sell the bonds. And so the things you're going to negotiate, and the reason you have the financial advisor, and you will have them much more on board at that point, is, okay, what is the going market right now? Is it 7 years? Are bondholders okay with 7 years? Is that going to cost you any kind of interest rate in order to get the 7 years? Probably right now, probably not, but the financial advisor needs to tell you that. Maybe you want to lower that. Maybe you want to say 6 or 5 years. How much will it, how many basis points would that cost? Or up at the 8 or 9, will we actually get a little bit of a haircut on the interest rate by doing that?
Right.
So that's the negotiation that will go on when you actually sell the bonds. But 7 is a pretty firm number right now to kind of guess as to where that would be.
Because I think, as I heard, you heard, concern is how much interest is township would pay. And
Sure.
I think past practice has been that I've seen, just as a newly appointed trustee, is that the fiscal officer and the township trustee, board of trustees, and the administrator have worked diligently on past projects, and past practice has shown that they've paid down loans significantly earlier than the life of the loan.
And again, as long as the township is using sources other than from this levy in order to pay it down early,
Right.
that's perfectly okay.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm just thinking of anything else. Kenny, you have anything?
No.
Mr. Lucas?
There's a reason Ryan's here, and I certainly have no questions.
Thanks, Mr. Lucas.
The not to exceed number of 10 mil is set now. I guess if you would just kind of, illustrate though, there's a requirement that it can't, if the township wanted to take out $10 million, yet the fire station only cost $8 million, we would only be allowed to take out $8 million because the legislation says you could only do that.
That's exactly right. It's not just the legislation, but it's what I also provided you a proposed ballot language, and that's what the ballot language says as well. That's your agreement. It's going to be your handshake with the voters of the township that's what you will use the proceeds for, and you can't use it. It would be a violation of state law for you to use it anything beyond that, constructing, furnishing, and equipping a fire station building and improving the site thereof. And quite frankly, that's the state law aspect. On the federal law aspect, you're going to sell these as tax-exempt bonds, most likely. And what that means is the interest that's earned on the bonds by the bondholders is tax-free for most bondholders, or for most investors. As you might imagine, the IRS doesn't give that away for free. So there's all sorts of rules and regulations you have to follow in order to take advantage of that tax-free interest for the bondholders. One of which is you use the proceeds for capital needs and for the specific project that you said you were going to use it for. So you've actually got both state law and federal law that are going to constrict you to those uses. And by the way, the reason you would do tax exempt is obviously you should get a slightly lower interest rate than otherwise than you would otherwise get.
Okay. Anything additional?
Good. Thank you, Mr. Callender.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we do have resolution 2019-19. It's a resolution determining the proceeds with submitting a question of issuance of a bond in the aggregate principal amount of $10 million to the electors of the township pursuant to section 133.18 of the Ohio Revised Code. And the actual bond language, I'm sorry, the actual
Ballot language.
ballot language, which would be a proposed bond issue, shall bonds be issued to Concord Township for the purpose of constructing, furnishing, and equipping a fire station building and improving the site thereof in the principal amount of $10 million to be repaid annually over the maximum period of 28 years, and an annual levy of a property tax to be made outside the 10 mil limitations estimated by the county auditor to average over a repayment period of bond issue 0.83 mils for each $1 tax valuation, which amounts to 8.3 cents for each $100 of tax valuation commencing in 2019, first due in the calendar year 2020 to pay the annual debt charged on the bonds and to pay debt charges on any notes issued in anticipation of those bonds. That brings up one last question, Mr. Calendar. What happens if there's a delay and we don't reach it to 2020?
Yeah, so, and I'm glad you brought that up. By state statute, we have to have that in the ballot of your estimate of when you're going to start collecting. It is absolutely the township's right to say, we're not ready yet, we're not ready to issue the bonds yet, so we're not going to start collecting the taxes until 2020, or it's not going to go in the roll until 2020, collection 2021. So that the ballot has
back
to have
six months, so if it went on the ballot, let's say we were able to send it to the auditor's office for collection in June of 2020, taxpayer would not feel that until the following year.
That's exactly right.
Six months behind.
You assess in well, we can't really do it on a 6-month basis. We have to do it on an annual basis for stuff like this. But so what you would be saying there is, if you weren't ready, you didn't need the money until 2021. In other words, your first debt service is not until, and we can arrange it this way. In other words, first debt service is not until the middle or latter part of 2021. You put it on the rolls in 2020, but you don't collect it until 2021 if that's the case. Even though that's what the ballot language says, but that's a state statute thing that we've got to comply with.
Yeah, understand. You know, I only asked that question only because, you know, we know that the library bond issue that is there will fall off the rolls in 2020.
Gotcha.
You know, which is a .70. That was a bond issue that was refinanced and paid off early as well.
Right.
And so that will come off. It's my intent to get this as close to that as possible so that we don't bear a tax increase.
Yeah, so the key there would be just if you're working with the financial advisors and the capital markets bank to structure the debt so that it doesn't start until, you know, the first debt service doesn't start until 2021, until the first time you expect actual collections coming.
Sure. Understand. Mr. Rose, anything additional?
No, sir, thank you.
Mr. Lucas?
No.
Mike Connie?
No.
No.
I entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve resolution 2019-19.
Second.
Any discussion? Not hearing any discussion, I'd ask for a roll call vote.
Mrs. Luda?
Yes.
Mr. Malcheski?
Yes.
Mr. Dondorfer?
Yes.
Okay, future meetings and announcements. We have community days coming up. So I will remind everybody early that that is on August 10th. We have summer concerts series every Thursday when it's not raining. On July 18th at 7 p.m. We have Abbey Rodeo, so the place will be packed on tomorrow. On July 25th, we have the Chardon polka band. Again, that's at 7 p.m. on the following Thursday. August 2nd, we will have a staff meeting at 9 a.m. For those of you that are here and you want to attend that meeting, let us know. We'll get into a bigger room, but we can have some more thorough discussions that we've had tonight. On Tuesday, August 6th at 7 p.m., we will have a zoning commission meeting at Town Hall. On Wednesday, August 7th at 6:30, we have the trustees' office hours. At 7:30, we have the trustees' meeting. Again, that's August 7th, on Wednesday, August 7th. With that, I will close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Calendar, for being here.
Thanks, Mr. Calendar.